if you find the unicorn, the salesperson that's an incredible salesperson, but can also build those systems and processes, hallelujah.
Welcome to the Measure Success Podcast, and this is a sponsored message. Steve Caton is the founder and CEO of Altezza Solutions. He helps out founder-led business scale revenue through practical, fractional sales solutions. We encourage you to go to altezzasolutions.com to learn more about how he and his team can help you grow your business and not get burnt out. I also like to share an additional message. This is being recorded after the actual podcast. Steve has helped sponsor typically our messages, our podcast, it's 3-4 months or more before these can actually get recorded. Well, this is pretty fresh. This is just recorded a couple weeks ago. This message is timely, it's valuable, and there's a little bit of talk about football. Congratulations to Indiana University. Can you believe that? Indiana University has won the college football championship. And so you'll be seeing that as well. So anyways, I hope you enjoy this message on the Measure Success Podcast. And once again, I encourage you to go to altezzasolutions.com. Now on to the episode. Welcome to the Measure Success Podcast, where we talk with top leaders about effective strategies that inspire success. Just want to let you know, we are really excited to have the 40 strategy workshop. We've had our original one. We crushed it. We had a 100 net promoter score. And so if you're interested to learn more about kind of the event, there are only 40 business owners that get the opportunity to be at this. And we will have 8 to 10 professional speakers where you get to meet with on a one-on-one basis. This is an incredible event. Encourage you to learn more about that. Go to 40strategy.com to learn more. Excited about our guest today. We have Steve Caton. He's the founder and CEO of Altezza Solutions. He helps founder-led business scale revenue through practical, fractional sales systems. He has over 25 years of sales leadership. He's passionate about building systems. And what I was really excited about this is, this, if you're a business owner, one of the biggest challenges you have is, how can I grow and myself not be the center of that growth? And the reality is, we know when growing people's businesses, if you can't get out of the business, you're not going to be able to sell your company for the value that you think you are. It's a massive bottleneck behind what you do. So with that, Steve, I'm excited to talk about what you do. Welcome to the Measure Success Podcast.
Thanks, man. It's great to be here. And yeah, you nailed it with what you just said. And that is a problem that we're solving all the time. And that mindset of wanting to one day exit through a sale is a big key component in success. So we'll tease that out later on. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that out.
Of course, we're going to depart here just for a minute. So behind you, you have a Georgia Bulldog helmet. And what is that? What's the other helmet?
That's a Denver Bronco helmet.
Okay. So where's the connection there?
Okay. So the Georgia connection is this where I grew up. I went to school at UGA, so I'm an alum. And you cannot go to that school without becoming a very rabid football fan, which I was, growing up in Georgia. You can't do that. So yeah, I bleed red and black, as we say here. And then the Bronco connection comes from 23 years living in Colorado. So I became a Bronco fan there. I've always been way more of a college football fan than a pro football fan, but the Denver environment, especially when the team is good, is very close to a college experience when you go to there. So lots of fun.
Okay, that's awesome. It's good to know that. And this will get aired after, it will release most likely after the college football playoff in 2026 is complete. But we were lamenting a little bit before this, and it will be very interesting to see where this goes live because as you know, I'm a Husky University of Washington alum.
Yeah.
And Oregon is in the playoff. Georgia, unfortunately, lost. So I was lamenting that they are not in to beat Oregon later on. Once again, sorry for all you Oregon Duck fans who are out there. Who knows what happened in the playoff? This might have to get fully edited out. We'll figure that out. We're just hoping that the O still stands for Oregon and 0 national championships. All right, so we're going to move forward and actually talk about business here because that is ultimately what this show is about. Of course, having a little bit of fun. So, Steve, let's get back to this. Like, how did you get into this? What gave you the confidence to and experiences? You're like, man, there's a problem, right? There's a problem in the market of owners get stuck where they're the people trust only them, like to sell things, and they can't ever truly find a great sales professional to help out what they're doing. And so as a result of that, they get hands doing everything, and if they leave the business, like literally the business goes away. They go on vacation, they stop getting sales as much. So how do you get into this, what you're doing?
Yeah, completely anchored in my professional journey. So I've been in sales my whole career. It's all I've ever done. I had about a 10-year stint where I owned a company with a business partner in my kind of 20s and early 30s. After that, I went into working for others for a little while, and then I was in a company in the the initial .com boom, and then the .com bust. And so on the backside of the bust, I was kind of back out there thinking, I think I want to go to work for myself again. And so I started actually doing kind of fractional sales before that was even a term. So I was putting myself out there in the marketplace as a guy who could come in and help emerging growth companies with sales. Um, but not full time. I didn't want to get hired full time. I wanted to build a company that did that. And long story short, I got hired, by a couple of them, one of which I stayed with for about 10 years. But here's the pattern that I saw when I was doing that work. And this would have been, early 2000s, right through about 2007 when I went to work for one of those clients and stayed there for 10 years. But here's what I saw were founders that, started a good company, usually in technology, but it was also some professional services companies in there too, where, the founder, they close the first deals. They know the market better than anyone. They improvise, they pitch, they follow up, they get it done, right? And they love it. Typically, some don't, but most of them do because there's a lot of fun and energy with that. But then at some point, they become the bottleneck. They're still selling, but they're also trying to stay on top of all the other things they need to do to be the strategic leader they wanted to be when they started the business. So whether that's running ops or supporting the team, building for what's next, and they feel that tension, right? Because they tell themselves, yeah, I know I'm not going to be here long term, but deep down, they don't really know how to get out of that trap, so they kind of feel trapped. They know they've got to get out of the trap if they want to grow their company, if they want to scale it. But it feels a little scary for a number of reasons. And so the patterns I saw there were, okay, I'm going to go hire somebody to do sales, but because of the stage of growth they were in, they couldn't really afford to go hire very experienced salespeople because those are six-figure salaries and benefits and big comp plans. And that's usually not, attainable unless they've got a bunch of venture capital money. So then they go hire inexperienced salespeople that they can get affordably, and those people often struggle. So sometimes they just go through this cycle of hiring, firing, hiring, firing, and then they get to a point where they're like, I don't think I know what the heck I'm doing. So I guess I'll just keep doing it. When I say that, I'm talking about managing, leading salespeople. So they just kind of keep doing it. And so that pattern just stuck with me. And so when fast forward to 2020, when I was finally at a place where I wanted to start a business again, I said, I'm going to start a business to fix that problem.
No, I appreciate you going through this. This is something, when we do our assessment of companies and we look at 25 core areas, um, the inability to scale sales and having the owner caught in the business of selling is typically one of the biggest things that caps them, right?
Yeah.
They're just literally capped.
Yep.
And even there's something I've seen, you might laugh at this, and I'm sure you've seen this, Steve. How many CEOs do you know? You don't know how many hate sales.
Oh, a bunch. Yeah. There's a lot that hate it. There's a lot that love it, so I would say in my experience, I'd say it's probably an 80-20 breakdown. 80% hate it, 20% love it. Um, yeah, but there are the ones that love it. They really have a hard time getting out of the sales seat because they love the kind of the dopamine hit that they get when they close a new deal, right? And they just live for that. But you can't keep doing that. I mean, I'm one of those people, so I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, no, it is super fascinating, right? I remember one of the companies we came in as a PE backed company, and we couldn't figure out why they hadn't moved for 5 years. And we found out literally, not only did they hate sales, they hated salespeople.
Yes. Yes.
And because they were kind of like more of an engineer type thinking,
Yes.
and by the way, nothing wrong with engineers. They're the smartest people in the world, right? But,
Yep.
they were just, they kind of had that mindset, but they hated salespeople, no growth in the company. And they just always found a way to kill the salespeople because they didn't like it. They didn't like that process, right, of developing trusted relationships, right, which would require us to ultimately, especially when you have high ticket sales, right, of different products, different areas. So I'm curious when I don't know many companies say I'm super happy with exactly my sales. I mean, every business owner is like, we could do better. But what is the typical thing they're saying to you?
When they come to
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When they come to you, like, what are they like kind of screaming for? They're like, I need what?
Yeah, I think there's two situations that we see over and over and over again. One is kind of I touched on it a little bit there. Hey, I tried to hire some salespeople. I've hired two or three, and none of them have worked out. So clearly, either I don't know how to hire salespeople, or I don't know how to lead salespeople. But I can't keep doing this because it's costing me a ton of time, money, energy. So can you help? That would be one. The second one is the founder that goes already is self-aware enough to know that they don't know how to lead salespeople or hire salespeople. So they go, I know I need to get salespeople in here, but I don't know anything about them, and I kind of don't like them, like you were saying. I don't like them, so I don't think I can lead them. So I need your help, you know. So those are the two most common scenarios that we need, but it's always driven by the fact that they've grown for a little while and then they've plateaued, and they realize the plateau is because of, they are the ones being the bottleneck for sales and they need to get out of it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's okay. All right. So you come into a company, they hire you, and we'll say in this case they're hiring you because they recognize they need a better talented salesperson. Like they're in that case of I keep on hiring salespeople, they're not being successful with it. So why are you different, right, than everyone else is doing this? Like people that could hire or other people who are doing this. What makes your system or process more effective?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think this gets to the essence of why I think, going back to what you were saying about why sales and sustainable, predictable sales growth is always a bit of a moving target. It's a bit of a mystery. How do we find that? The reason that is true, and I'm talking at the principal level now, the reason that sales is really difficult is because it's not just about the salesperson, right? The salesperson is a part of the engine, but there's all these other things around the salesperson that have to be, kind of refined and working well before the salespeople can be successful. And typically those are things like, we call it collectively the kind of sales operating system. That's the term we use. But what that is just really strong understanding of who your ideal client is, really good messaging that creates a signal instead of just noise in the market. It's a signal because it's clear. um, Understanding of, good messaging, good sales playbooks and scripts, and then sales process, right? Understanding the steps that people go through in the buying decision to get from I'm curious to now I'm ready to do business with you, and everything that happens in between, and having that documented and built into a CRM with clear steps that salespeople can follow. All of those things I just said oftentimes are missing,
Mhm.
and they just go hire the salesperson and they go, well, they're salespeople, they'll figure it out, right? Well, not not often, right? If you find the unicorn, the salesperson that's an incredible salesperson but can also build those systems and processes, man, hallelujah. You're probably paying a whole lot of money for them, though, because those people are really hard to find and they're worth a lot of money. um, so in most cases, again, emerging growth companies can't do that. So what makes us unique is that we are providing all of that, and not just a salesperson. So we're not just saying, hey, here's your sales pro, good luck, call us if you need us. It's no, we spend a lot of time evaluating that sales operating system and then bringing in very skilled sales leaders who are good at building that if needed before we plug in the salespeople. So it's not, our model isn't just about bodies and hired guns. It's about the combination of the systems, the processes, the strategy, and the people to execute on it.
That is good. So I want to go back to one of the things you said in the earlier part there, which is the signal.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm curious. hearing about you because I feel that's as much as a science as is an art, right? Of trying to figure out what is that signal or combination of signals that clarifies to a potential buyer why they might be interested in you, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so let's talk through that. How do you help discern and get somebody? Because that's a little bit even more on the marketing side to some extent, right? It's like this, it's like it's trying to clarify what your product or service is, so somebody think that they need it, right? They actually need that product or service. So what do you do to get to that point where it's crystallized and it's working?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you mentioned marketing, and it's very common for us to see people confusing marketing with sales and sales with marketing, right? So you've probably seen this in your scenario where people hire a salesperson thinking that their job is to generate leads, right? That's not what salespeople do, right? Salespeople close leads. If you're sending them out to find the leads, there was a day and time when that worked, right? Some cold calling, smiling and dialing, and you had a room of salespeople are just grinding and doing that all day long. With that, I mean, there might be some businesses where that works, but it's really hard in a B2B context today. It's very difficult. Salespeople are not lead generation. So there, a lot of times what we run into is, okay, you need a salesperson, but there's no leads for them to work with. So what you need to do is work on the lead generation piece. So we'll actually bring in some marketing partners to help them with the branding, the messaging, the clarity around all those things I talked about with ideal client profile and whatnot. Let's get that work done and then figure out a way to actually generate some interest in your business. Then you'll be ready for salespeople. So we avoid the mistake of plugging salespeople in when there's no marketing and no leads.
That is good. Okay, so now let's go to the next step, which is, I know this very much depends on the business, so this might be a impossible question, but I'll ask it anyways. How do you know when you've got the marketing machine going enough where there's enough leads where a salesperson can actually go through the process of actually trying to process those leads to close?
Yeah, I think that comes, that's basically what you're looking at there is driven a lot of times by the size of the sale that you're making and the length of the sales cycle and how many deals actually need to be closed to be profitable, right? So if you're talking about let's talk about like an enterprise software sale, or we've worked at Altezza with these software development companies that basically if they get, somewhere between 2 to 5 new clients a year, that's a home run for them because these projects are well into the 6 figures, sometimes 7 figures, right? Um, so in that case, you don't need a huge pipeline to be successful. You need a good pipeline. Probably, I typically, conversion rates when I think about, the kind of standard percentages. Typically, if I've got what's called marketing qualified leads, which are basically people who are aware of my business, they may not be ready to do business, but they know who I am and they know about what I do, and they're curious, right? If you can have a conversion rate of, let's call it, somewhere between 30 to 50% of those marketing qualified leads, those curious people, into sales qualified, which is now I'm ready to have a sales conversation. And then you're converting somewhere between 20 to 40% of those to clients. That's a pretty good rule of thumb. I know it's over generalizing it, but if you think in those terms, that can help you understand how big your pipeline needs to be.
And thank you. I mean, thank you for going through that because it's the analytics, right? It's like it is a numbers game to some extent, but that numbers game is very different depending on the value of the product that you sell and what
Yep.
your sales targets are at the end of the day.
Yep. That's
But
right.
understanding that clearly is then critical, of course, for the actual sales process, right? Of, okay, now we have, 100 MQLs, right? Market qualified leads that have come through, and we know they have a certain sales target, but then we also need to understand the buying process for the client, right? For the client, potential client, potential
Correct.
lead, not our sale. takes time. It's
Yes.
especially when you have high ticket items, right? These things are not typically selling in 12 minutes, right? It's usually a process of going through that. So I'm assuming, I'm making an assumption here. You're going back and you're unwinding and going, here's how long the sales process and the lead is. And you're going back and doing all the metrics to go through. This is ultimately what we need, a qualified salesperson to look at these qualified sales leads to be successful.
Yeah, we're evaluating all of that as we look at that sales operating system. And one of the what you just described there is very much unknown to a lot of founders and business owners. So they don't fully, that's part of the mystery of sales, is they understand it's a numbers game, but understanding the intricacies of the numbers game is a little bit lost on them. So they don't know really how to predict, okay, if I hire a salesperson today, when can I expect them to actually generate results? And so they just kind of go into it blindly and they hire the salesperson. They don't really have an understanding of the metrics, or maybe the metrics are missing altogether. And then, 3 months, 4 months later, they're like, well, this guy hadn't sold anything, so he must be terrible. I'm going to fire him. Well, what they probably what they may not know is they're really close to being at that point where they're starting to close deals, and they fired him right at about the time that the momentum was going to hit. But because they don't understand the metrics, or they don't have visibility into the metrics, they don't know. So they're just flying on gut feel, which is never a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's thank you. I mean, this once again why I like to talk about this. It's always this fascinating thing between the marketing and sales, and often salespeople get a bad, not all of them, some get a bad rap, right? For and it's like, no, we're actually having them do what's not actually their job,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
The job is to, hey, you put someone in front of them. Their job is now to close that. So now let's go into that piece, the closing, right? There are a lot of methodologies in the closing. I'm curious, what do you coach
Mm.
systems around? There's the challenger sale out there. There's so many different processes or thought processes on it. What do you all use to help increase the likelihood that a potential lead is going to end up wanting to buy your product or service?
Yeah, and keep in mind, this is going to be coming from a perspective of working with a lot of kind of enterprise level technology and professional services. So not selling widgets, right? These aren't widgets. So selling consumer products or widgets is different. But when you're selling more complex services, I'm a big fan of the Challenger sale. I took my whole sales team through it back in the day when that was, when that first came out, and I still love it. I think it's great. It's a good framework. I think to simplify things, what I always say is that really good salespeople are very curious. And
Mm.
so it's really about just being incredibly curious to the point where you are just naturally know how to ask great questions and then peel the onion. Because if you're just the person that has the list of questions and you check the box, that's not what I'm talking about. It's more like I'm asking a question, I hear an answer, and I'm going, I heard something there. Let me dig deeper, right? And you're able to, through incredibly well thought out questions and strategic relationship building, you're able to help that prospect get to the point where they're actually making their own conclusion about whether this is the right thing for them to do or not. And there's no need to be manipulative when it comes time to close. So the close, if this is done well, is just the next logical step in the process, as opposed to this thing that I've got to manipulate you into doing by throwing out discounts or being high pressure and things like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Does that make
that's
sense?
yeah, no, no, absolutely makes sense. And thank you once again. Thanks for going through it. All right, so as we're continuing to go through, are you playing both the role of sometimes your team members, and it seems like it is, are doing it, or are you also helping them to hire full-time people when they go to, what typically role are you playing when you're supporting your clients?
Yeah, the I'll tell you the typical scenario that we see all the time. So again, going back to kind of a founder led situation, And most of the time, I can tell you that the marketing and lead generation is not as mature as it needs to be. So what we do in those situations is we help the founder understand how they can kind of amp up the activity and the volume on their rainmaking activities. Because as a founder, we're being a rainmaker for our business. That's how we get it to where it is today. So what we show them is, hey, if we bring in a closer who can take those deals you're creating with your rainmaking and get them across the finish line, we're going to up the ante on sales growth just by doing that, right? And then in the process, we're going to build systems and processes that are going to be sustainable so that one day when we're not here and you're fully out of sales, you can now hand that over to a full-time salesperson and they can just take it and run with it, or a team, you know. So that's that's the scenario we are in most of the time. And here's what we're seeing on the transition to full time. We've done that. In fact, just talked today to a client who's been with us for 3 years, and they actually are hiring the person that we matched with them, which hasn't happened very often because most of the people on our team love being fractional sales people, but this guy really hit it off with his salesperson and vice versa. So they're hiring him, which is really cool. That doesn't happen as much as I thought it would when I started the company. I actually thought that would be really common, but I think what's happening is everybody's mind has been open to the power of fractional services.
Yeah.
And I think people are, so more often than not, what customers are doing with us is saying, hey, can we get more fractional salespeople? Can we get more hours from the ones that we have? And they're not really going towards the full-time hire as much as they were before.
Yeah, it's amazing on the, forgive me, a very different business, but on the accounting side, we're finding that so often because there's so much waste in a full-time employee.
Yes. Yes.
Just period, right?
Yeah. 100%.
Rarely are they fully 100% of the time working on why they're creating value.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and just go ahead. I've got a point to make there.
And so, like we run in this, like, sorry to the analogy here, like in accounting, we run in this. A lot of closing is a 1 to 2 week period, or accounts payable is a few hour a day period. It's not a full-time job for a lot of these small companies.
That's right.
But they'll have a full-time employee because they think that's what they have to do. And the reality is they're paying for 5 to 6 hours a day that they're not getting value for. And it's amazing how much cost can be saved. You can save 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% of your cost by thinking differently, right? And that's exactly what you're doing on the sales side. You're helping to think differently. Like, yeah, you don't have to pay a highly professional, successful salesperson $150,000, $200,000 a year when you can pay a fraction of that and still get the sales what you're looking for.
Yeah. And I think that what you're talking about there, Carl, is something that is not only is it not known, but I think that a lot of people don't believe it. I really do. I think they don't believe it because they think, how can that be possible? But here's the studies that have been done specifically in sales show that the average full-time salesperson is only spending about 10 to 15 hours a week doing legit revenue generating activities. And then the rest of the time, who knows what they're doing? They're sitting in meetings, they're doing admin work, they're cleaning up lists, they're entering stuff in the CRM. Heck, I mean, I remember, working in high tech. Most of the time I saw salespeople playing foosball or something. It's like, what the heck? Get in there and sell, man.
No, it's and this is those examples once again of when you can create the funnel of leads and you are paying only for the closing time, for lack of a better term here, or that whole closing time process, you're going to get so much more ROI out of the entire thing and be so much less frustrated, right? Because and I mean this, and I love you all great salespeople who are out there listening, and I genuinely do. But great salespeople are a lot, meaning the great hunters of the world are unique human beings. And so if you could find ways to get a fraction of that and not have to deal with all of the stuff around it, there's a lot of value in that. And so I go back to it. Funny enough, that person who hated salespeople, I think sometimes these fractional sales, what you are doing, is such a great opportunity for them to not have to worry about managing the Madonnas of the world, so to speak, right?
Yeah,
And I mean this,
that's right.
by the way, I love salespeople. See, I'm different than the other person. I love great salespeople because great salespeople solve my strategy and accounting problems, right? You know, and or a lot of them, some, but some when it's done well. Steve, this has been fantastic. I'm curious for you now. How do you measure success with your clients?
One of the things that we try to focus on is the number of founders we serve, right? So, when I started the company, my dream was I want to impact, thousands of founders who were in this position, because I know there literally are. There's probably tens, hundreds of thousands of them. So our goal over the next 3 years is to impact 1,000 founders. We want to somehow make a difference. That doesn't mean we'll be placing salespeople in all of those founders, but we'll somehow help them be able to escape the sales trap. So we measure success by the number of founders we get to serve. And then we also obviously look for the stories, right? So growth of revenue is the most obvious one because we're in sales. But one of the stories I heard a couple of years ago from a client that was, man, I have to say even more meaningful than the numbers growth was his wife telling the salesperson that we had matched with the company that she appreciated him because her husband was home for dinner every night now instead
Mm,
of being at the office until late at night trying to catch up on all the things he couldn't do because he was too busy selling. So we look for things like that too.
yeah, that's a good story. And once again, the spouses of you who are out there listening, this is where you should call up Steve to help. I tell you, I mean, once again, sales solves so many problems when done well. And then once again, the fractional sales type approach is fantastic. So, Steve, you're a busy guy. You are doing a lot of different things yourself. I always love to talk to leaders of what type of habits are you doing personally on a consistent basis to help make sure you could perform at your best.
Yeah, well, and for me, I've got a daily routine that I've developed over the years that is, it really, I don't see myself as a creature of habit. I don't like to think of myself that way. I've, trying to be more spontaneous, but that daily routine is a big deal. And I know when it doesn't happen, the day is going to go differently than normal. But my daily routine, Carl, I always start the morning with time in scripture. I'm a man of faith, so I want to spend time in the word. And so I have this period of time in the morning where there's no tech, there's no technology. I'm not on my phone. I don't turn on the TV. I stay way far away from the news. And I just dive into the word and I spend 30 minutes at least just in prayer and reflection. And that centers me, and gets my mind in the right place. And then I have some exercise I do in the morning as well. I think having regular exercise is a big deal. That usually, sometimes I'll do that before the quiet time. Sometimes I'll do it right after, but they're always in tandem with each other, just depending on, where I'm at, if I'm traveling or not. And then just trying to always eat well. Eating well is a big deal for me. I definitely notice the difference in my day if I eat junk food versus eating healthy food. And then regular exercise. And for me, if I just get out and walk 30 minutes a day, just do a nice power walk outdoors, that's all I need to do. I do more than that, but at a minimum, I want to do that.
Steve, anyways, thank you for sharing that. And then, amen, brother. Good for you getting up each morning and getting in the word each day. I mean, it's amazing, right? How it can make a difference in your life when you get your prioritized focused right in the right
Yeah,
place, right? And because it just helps all the other worries of the world get so much easier to get through because they're always going to be there, right?
always.
And before you move forward. And so I think that is an excellent part. So I always like to ask this question. Oh, wait. So let me go to the next part. Of course, how do you now measure success in your personal life?
Yeah, for me, it's all about relationships. The key important relationships in my life. Just always being attentive to the quality of those relationships. So, when I think about my wife, my kids, my close friends, the people I work with, I want to make sure I'm investing in those relationships so that those relationships are where I want them to be. And so that's what I look at when those relationships are working well. Then I feel like that's how I measure success in my personal life. And, obviously things like fitness and whatnot too, but the relationship piece is clearly the most important thing for me.
Awesome. All right. What's a book that you consistently recommend to others?
Well, you know what? I'm one of these. I'm kind of I don't. wouldn't call myself a prolific reader. I'm not like crazy, but I'm always reading something. And so there are some books that I'm like, okay, well, this is a staple, like, Good to Great, the Challenger Sale you brought up earlier, The Gap and the Gain, things like that, that I'm like, okay, these are on my list, right? But I just finished reading the book, The AI Driven Leader, which was
Mhm.
incredibly helpful for me because I think, like a lot of people out there, I was trying to wrap my head around what the hell do I do with AI? What does it mean? I know I can't ignore it. I know I can't ignore it, but I don't really know what to do with it. And so that book was so helpful in terms of giving me a roadmap and an understanding of how I can actually use it to be a better leader, and maybe how our company can use it as well. So I'd say that's a really good book to read right now.
Great recommendation. Steve, how can people connect and learn more about what you're doing?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm pretty active. That's like the only kind of, it's not really social media, right? But it is the closest thing to social media that I do. You can find me. My name is not common, so Caton is not a common name. There's not a lot of us out there, so I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. And then our website is altezzasolutions.com, and that's the best place to go to learn about the work that we do.
Steve, thank you so much for being a guest on the Measure podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Carl. This has been great. Love the conversation.
And to whoever was listening, if you are in that situation, especially if you are a founder-led business, and if sales are not exactly where you want them to be, or as Steve mentioned, you are spending so much time keeping things going, you can't spend time to get home for dinner with your loved ones. It's time to take a look at somebody like Steve to help out your business. So I encourage you to go out, look up Steve Caton on Caton, once again, on LinkedIn. And also as their website, Altezza Solutions, definitely the place to go